So today I want to talk about the behavioral tells that you can use to sort of measure whether you're running into someone who might be predatory and controlling and manipulative in nature. There are patterns to all of these things. I think I touch on some of that in like a lot of my different videos. I want to talk about the specific pattern to how these relationships begin today, because there is a real pattern to this thing. And some of you might have already noticed this pattern. I mean, if you watch like back-to-back docu-series on manipulators and exploiters, for example, I was watching The Puppet Master on Netflix, and then I was also watching the documentary on Sarah Lawrence on Hulu. And if you just watch these two side by side, these people's approaches to how they manipulate people is incredibly similar, even though the stories are very different. So I kind of just want to talk about that. So because they have indicators, just like we have indicators, they have behavioral tells. Indicators are tells. So these people have tells, and if you can learn to spot the patterns, you can spare yourself from a lot of misery in advance, which would obviously be beneficial to all of us. So what happens is essentially you're cased by someone. This is either something that they explicitly do, or this is something that's almost like a snake in the grass being able to smell out a scent with its tongue. It's second nature to them. Whether it's intentional or whether it's second nature, you're cased. And they essentially assess you to see what it is about you that seems vulnerable, because they're looking for vulnerabilities. What I would compare this to, and I'm sure I've mentioned this in other videos, but this is essentially a person who's almost like, you could compare it to someone attempting to break into a house. They're looking through the windows and they're trying to see if this house seems vulnerable, if this house is possible to be broken into. You are the metaphorical house, and many people are able to do this within a matter of seconds or a matter of minutes. This is not, they learn more about you over time as well, but we actually are all walking around giving off indicators about ourselves in ways that we are not even aware of. And to become aware of your own indicators is also something that is not only incredibly empowering, because then you can control the narrative that you are giving off as you walk around, and in a sense prevent unwanted interactions just from the story that you're telling and who that causes to walk up to you and approach you. The other reason why this is just important to be aware of, though, is because if you're aware of the vulnerabilities in your house, in your body, in your soul, in your personality, if you're aware of your vulnerabilities, if you owned a house and you knew that there was a window that you could break into easily, or there was like a door that didn't have a very effective lock, wouldn't you manage that area better, be more aware of it, fix it, do whatever it is that you needed to do? It's the same thing with yourself. So step one is casing. If you come off as a vulnerable person, then there's a great likelihood that you're going to be approached by someone who is manipulative in nature. I'll make another video on what indicators make you appear or show that you are a vulnerable person, but essentially they see your vulnerabilities and they decide, hey, this house is a potential house that I can come to own, because ownership is always the end goal. I will now attempt to move into this house, to break in. But they're not going to break in behind your back. They're essentially going to come and knock at the door. And knocking at the door is that first conversation that they have with you. Whether that's someone walking up to you in a bar, someone approaching you on a dating app, a workplace environment where a coworker or a manager comes up and has that initial first conversation with you. Either way, this is the knock at the door. So when they knock at the door and you answer, in this first conversation that you have with someone at a bar, workplace, wherever, on a dating app, eventually, at some point, a role is presented to you, and a role is presented for them. And this is the second step. They have to present these roles. They have to begin the narrative that they need to be between the two of you for the house breaking in and the house ownership to occur. this is the step-by-step process that makes that the most effective. What is presented for you is a pedestal role. That's what I call it. That's roles where you are essentially placed on a pedestal. And what's so interesting is you can see this in marketing techniques. You can see this in business interviews where they're attempting to hire you on, and maybe that's actually not a workplace environment that's not even that great. There's lots of places where the pedestal role can be presented to you. But either way, the pedestal role is essentially where you are the most special. There is no one like you. A lot of times I hear this all the time with people. I've never encountered anyone like you. I hear that all the freaking time. And the reason why they're presenting it in this kind of way, where you are so special and you're so unique and you're the only one, it makes you feel special, literally. But two, they need you to feel like they have never done this with anyone else. And what's so creepy about all of this is this isn't something that they sat down and like mapped out in their head. This is where I come to believe that this world is spiritual in a lot of ways, because you see these behavioral patterns across the board. You see this approach used across the board. Where did they learn this? You don't have a freaking predator school that you go to with a predator class that teaches you this approach, and yet this is the approach that's taken by predators and manipulators. So where are they learning this? And for me personally, I believe that you can receive spiritual education and spiritual influence of sorts from the spirit world. That's just my personal opinion, because I find this very interesting that this pattern does exist without some kind of class that everybody attended. And I also just want to point out that this area of people being presented the special role, we all are special. We are all unique. It's not that, but when you need to be special, when it actually comes from a place of insecurity where this is something that you need in order to feel complete inside, which by the way, you never will if this is the thing that you need, because it's like a transitional thing that you can never actually like attain. It's like happiness. It's like floating around in the ethosphere, and you might feel special to one person, but then eventually you need to feel special to another person. It's very transitory. And so because of that, our ego is exploited through this need. And so if you need to be the special one according to other people, then this is an area where you are vulnerable, and you should be aware of that. I also want to point out that this is where you can be humble, and this was something I wasn't aware of when I was younger, but I've really learned this today. Like, there is a difference between happiness. I always used to think happiness was like shallow. Like, people who were happy were just fucking oblivious to everything painful and horrible going on in the world. And if you actually were aware of everything horrible going on in the world, you wouldn't be freaking happy. So it had to be one or the other. You either had to be in like intolerable emotional pain and aware of all of the suffering going on around you, because that was your duty to society, etc., or you were happy and oblivious. And that's not true. You can be intentionally joyful. You can be aware and educated, and then with that education and that awareness of suffering, you can be intentionally joyful in response to that. And I think that is a deeper and wiser experience to live inside of. The same goes for humility. So there's false humility where the person isn't actually humble. They're just incredibly insecure and essentially a shell of themselves. And then there's where you are purposefully and intentionally educated on things like this, things about yourself, whatever it may be, but you have a knowledge about yourself. And despite that knowledge about yourself, you are intentionally humble. You don't use it to prop yourself up on a pedestal. You don't use it to walk around and belittle those around you. You are intentionally humble despite and with the knowledge that you are constantly gathering around you. So this is also an area where if you're humble in a false way, aka actually just incredibly insecure, this is also what can cause you to need the special one role, if that makes sense. So they present you with the special role. The second role that is presented to you is that you are also broken. And so this comes from the trauma bonding that happens in that initial conversation. A lot of these guys that I run into and a lot of the documentaries that I watch on situations like this, the people who are vulnerable because they are broken and insecure and have this desperate need to be the special one, they overshare. And like I've talked about in my other videos, how grooming can leave you handicapped, we have a tendency to overshare as well after we've been taught to overshare. And I think the internet encourages us to overshare. I mean, I'm literally making a video right now and posting it on YouTube to complete strangers about myself. And that could be considered oversharing. You know what I mean? So we overshare, they encourage us to overshare, and we essentially tell them our broken, shattered, horrible trauma that we've been through, life story, etc. And from this, they present us with the role, they interpret our story for us. So I've had people do this literally I've only known them for like a day or two, and they like tell me how to interpret my own life story. They just met me, and they tell me how to interpret my own life story. And it's so subtle. But if you come off as very charming and very wise, it's obviously, and then if they come off as charming and wise and you know nothing about yourself, you're a shell of yourself, you're obviously going to feel tempted to take this other person's interpretation of your life. Because A, it feels like they listen to you, and B, you almost yearn for that leadership role in someone else, right? You want someone to guide you. You want to have someone who can help you process the things that you've been through. They do this for you, and they present you with the role of the broken one, the vulnerable one, the one who needs help. And so when these two roles are presented to us, we have to accept these roles. They essentially present the role, and we have to choose to believe it as truth. We have to choose to believe that we are the special one, and we have to choose to believe that we are broken and need help. And I would also include that the other half of this, like if they're not literally presenting you with a role like date me, if this isn't in a romantic setting, the other way that something like this role can be presented without words is someone asking you to do something incredibly intimate or incredibly risky with them without even knowing them. And if you choose to do the incredibly risky thing, or the thing that feels kind of unsafe or intimate when you don't even know them, if you choose to do that intimate kind of unsafe thing with them, that is you also essentially accepting that role without realizing it. I remember I was talking to someone who was from Italy. They were talking about the evil eye, and just talking about from a different kind of almost like spiritual standpoint, how they believe that like there's all these different ways that you essentially like accept blessings or curses from people, or like energy from people. And they believe that one way of even doing that is accepting like gifts from people. If they like don't like you that much and then they give you a gift and you accept the gift, you're accepting the energy like attached to that gift. I just thought that was kind of like a really interesting theory of how things work, and like the spirit world, which is beyond us in a lot of ways. But either way, I feel like that fits into what I'm kind of describing. It's not necessarily that you're accepting energy into your life or like a curse, but you're accepting a role, an unspoken role. Because if you're choosing to do the intimate or kind of unsafe thing with them, you're basically teaching them, I'm choosing to view you as safe, even though I don't actually know if you're safe or not. You're giving away your trust, and you're accepting them as trustworthy. You know what, does that make sense? So I just also see that as well as another way that you can accept the role without verbally stating anything. And this is also actually a part of the love bombing process as well. While they're love bombing you with like words and how you're so special verbally, they're also encouraging you sometimes to do incredibly intimate things very quickly, things that are kind of risky and unsafe, again, because a lot of these people are adrenaline junkies and teach us to be adrenaline junkies, or maybe we already are adrenaline junkies. But so that also encourages that trauma bonding process of like, yes, I trust you to take care of me. Yes, I trust you in the sense of doing this thing together that maybe we shouldn't be doing. And it creates that enmeshment, etc. And that's a two-part process. And in AA, they talk about that, how there's two sides of the street. There's the one person and their actions and what they did. And then there's our side of the street and our actions and what we did. And it's not victim shaming. It's not saying it's your fault that these horrible bad things happened, because the bad things did not come from you. But it's just understanding like how you're driving your car so that you don't keep getting in car accidents. You know what I'm saying? Just because somebody presents you with a role doesn't mean that that's the truth and and you have to accept it as truth, especially if they're a stranger. And this is a really important life skill that I have started practicing very recently in my life because I wasn't even aware that I was doing this. And this is like step 2 in the grooming process. So just be aware that very early on, this is the first way that you screw yourself over. This is the first necessary thing that has to happen for the game to begin. If you do not accept the rules, they will walk away. I guarantee you. If you choose to deny being special, and if you choose to deny being broken, they will walk away. It might not be immediately, but they will try again and again to present those roles. And that's also a part of the rushed process. If you say no, which I've done, I've said no, I want to take it slow. I don't know if I really agree with that. You taking it slow in the relationship is you not accepting the roles being presented. That is you not accepting it because you're taking your time in deciding whether you trust their opinion of things, and they don't like that. So a role is presented for you, but a role is also presented for them. They tell their own life story from their own standpoint, and they present themselves as the hero, the rescuer, also the victim oftentimes, but within being a victim, for you personally, they are the rescuer and the hero. So they present themselves essentially in a special pedestal role too. So both of you are on pedestals, right? And this is because this essentially creates, and I don't know if this is an actual archetype, but I'm just using the word archetype because it fits into that category of things. But it creates this archetype of the royal couple is how I see it in my mind. You see yourself as this like over glamorized, like extra special couple, the power couple. We have terms like this in American society where we present people in these pedestal roles and then we crave a pedestal role for ourselves and basically essentially being a royal couple of sorts, just like other celebrities are created to be viewed as royal couples. And so we crave that. And so by them placing us on a pedestal and placing themselves on a pedestal, we are now the royal couple. But instead of them being the broken one, they are the hero. Does that make sense? So it's like you're both on pedestals, but you're broken on a pedestal and they're a hero on a pedestal. So without realizing it, this is what I realize now in hindsight. You're both on pedestals, but they've created your archetype with a flaw. And this flaw is what is used against you later. This flaw is what they use to knock you off your pedestal later. So they start out your archetype with a flaw and they start out their archetype as perfect and flawless. And this whole pattern that happens, this very subtle and yet very powerful thing that happens within your first 1, 2, 3 conversations with them, however long it takes before they present you with the special role and with the royal couple offer, essentially, this moment is so pivotal for the rest of your relationship with them because what you do determines the entire cycle for the rest of the relationship, because you essentially, if you accept what they offer with these roles, and you can always retract it later. I mean, sometimes I'll fall for this stuff and then later I'll be like, oh, I'm doing the same shit again. Whoops. Just kidding. And I retract it. So it's not like once you accept the roles, like you're doomed forever and you can never leave the relationship. But just understand, if you're not like aware of this cycle, and a lot of people aren't, if you allow them to be the truth decider and the determiner of the narrative just in this first conversation, because that's what they've done, right? They've essentially created this whole thing by themselves. You've listened, you've vented, you've talked about yourself, but they are the ones that have created the story and presented you with the beginning chapter of the story. They did that. You really didn't contribute to much of it. They are the ones that have begun the story. And that is why, if you accept what they offer, they continue to be the storyteller for the rest of the relationship, because they created your archetype and theirs. And they created your archetype with a flaw. So what direction do you think that story is going to go in? And this is how brainwashing literally works, guys. This is how marketing works. If you look at advertisements and marketing, obviously if it's for something like a freaking Swiffer jet, they're not going to be like, you're special. with your Swiffer jet, although sometimes maybe they do. But if you start looking, this is everywhere, guys. It's everywhere. You are being presented with roles to accept by storytellers everywhere. Advertising is literally a story being presented. That's what a copywriter is. A copywriter is someone who works for an advertising company and they are paid to come up with stories. That's what advertisements are. They are 15-second to 1.5-minute stories that you watch, and they're asking you to accept the story that they are presenting to you in order to buy this product. And you buying the product is you accepting the story, the narrative that they're telling you, which is essentially that you need this thing, that this is going to benefit your life, this is going to make you happy, whatever. And the same thing can be true for movies sometimes too. And so if you become aware of this, this can be so empowering to free you from this stuff. But if you choose to always be the person looking for someone to be the storyteller in your life, instead of figuring out how to be your own storyteller, and this is not to pendulum swing the other way, guys, where we all become narcissists and we can't take feedback and criticism. That's a different thing. That is a completely different thing. Educating yourself and becoming defensive and shut down and completely unreceptive to any feedback whatsoever, that's not the same thing. So there's a balance to all of this, right? But the main key thing to all of this, my hair keeps going in my mouth, sorry. The main key thing to all of this is going slow, okay? This is not stuff, these are not skills you can learn overnight. These are not things you can figure out overnight. People are incredibly complex. You are incredibly complex. You cannot figure yourself out overnight. You cannot figure out another person overnight. And so if you go slow in the relationship and if you go slow in the education of yourself, you will get there eventually. Things grow slow. That's the pattern of nature, guys. And we think that we're being trained to live in a completely opposite way that's making us sick. Roots grow slow. Plants grow slow. Education in school or in anything is a long, lengthy, slow process. Intimacy is developed slowly. Things cannot happen quickly. You can't learn things quickly. You can, but not in the intimate way to where you actually know that thing. Like, I'm not trying to burst anyone's bubble, but a stranger can't know if you're special, guys. They just can't. There's nothing about any of us that is so unique that someone can look at us within a week, a day, or even 30 days and go, wow, you're so special. What determines if someone's special isn't that no one else is like us and the life skills that we have or anything like that. Someone finds us special because they look at us and they go, wow, the way that this is the healthy version, in my opinion. The healthy way of finding someone special isn't to say, wow, you're so unique that you're not like anyone else ever. It's not a competitive competition thing, because eventually there will be someone else like you. It's not that, in my opinion. I think in a healthy version of love, it's saying, wow, you know what? You treat me kinder and more like in a loving way than anyone else so far that I've met. And I love the way that you love me, the way that you care for me, the way that you show loyalty to me, the way that I know who you are and that you will actually love me in the way that I deserve to be loved, in the way that I desire to be loved. And you can't know that about a person after a week. You can't know that about a person after 30 days. Sorry, I'm like tongue-tied right now. But you really find that out over time through micro situations that you're in where you need something and they're there for you, or some accident happens and they just show up. Even though it's hard, even though it's difficult, they show you that even though things aren't always exciting, they stick around. When it gets boring, they don't mind. When you're having a hard day, they support and comfort you. They show you that over and over and over and over again. Not when it's easy, not at the beginning, but after months and months and months, they show you that behavior again and again and again. That when it's hard, they don't mind. That when things are boring, they don't mind. When the honeymoon stage wears off, they don't mind. because they love to love you. And you, in return, hopefully, are also loving them in the way that they deserve. And that is how you decide, I think, in a healthy way, that someone is special and that that is the person that you want. It's not about this other stuff that we're trained and brainwashed to think we should be measuring people by. Like, oh, you kayak and nobody else in the world has ever kayaked, so like that makes you special. Not in a competitive way. Does that make sense? Because guess what? You get old and maybe you can't do that amazing kayak thing anymore that they found so impressive that no one else was able to do except for you. It's that celebrity thing again, right? Or maybe you get in an accident and you become physically handicapped and you can't do the amazing kayak thing that you did. I don't know why I'm using kayaks. I'm rolling with it. But you know what I'm saying? Like the thing, if it's about your actions in terms of like your accomplishments, that's cool, but those things fade. You grow up. Sometimes you have kids and you can't do the amazing accomplishment thing that you used to do. You know, hobbies are great and things like that matter, but life can change. Life can change you, life can change them, and you get old and it becomes boring, and that's just life, guys. And so again, how are you determining that someone's special, and how are they determining that you are special? Just like you can't know yourself overnight, you can't know them overnight, you also can't develop safe, trusted people for feedback overnight either. It's like a list of plants that you're trying to start growing. It's all going to take a while. Or starting a garden. I guess that's an analogy that works because like a bunch of plants is a garden, so we can call it a garden because it's got a bunch of plants. Anyway, instead of shutting down and becoming someone who like can't receive any feedback and you're the only determiner of your truth, it's not that either. You want to have safe, trusted people who you can turn to for feedback. But again, you have to know how to recognize safe, trusted people. How do you recognize, what's your barometer for people that you trust? You have to educate yourself on that, or decide on your own and form on your own barometer, your own way of learning and detecting who is someone that you would welcome into your intimate circle. Keep those people around. Those are plants that take a while to grow, relationships that take a while to grow and establish and become something trustworthy. And things can shift and change over time, you know? But you have to learn about yourself. You have to have your safe, trusted friendships established in order to find and also slowly grow a safe, trusted relationship as well. It's just all stuff that has to happen slowly. But just know that like when you're like sitting here going, oh my gosh, how am I going to figure this all out on my own? This is where your safe, trusted people are so important to have, if you can find them. And if you find them, dear God, please hold on to them, because that is something so special and precious in this world. Friends matter. Friends can save you in so many situations that we cannot get out of on our own. And that is the one thing that a lot of these people try and take away from you and twist and warp. And it's because it is something that is so powerful and so important. That is your safety net, and they want to rip it out from underneath you and replace it with themselves as the storyteller instead. Do not get rid of your other friends and your other trusted relationships that can be your safety net. Other people's narratives and perspectives matter too. To have only one storyteller in your life is a giant red flag for how you're living your life. There should never be only one storyteller. There should never be only one person's perspective going on, unless, in my opinion, that is God's perspective. But that's where I'm sure some people, where we split hairs, and that's perfectly fine. But in terms of like flawed human beings walking around, to have one person that you're solely relying on, one human being that you're solely relying on for perspective, that is not the way to live at all. So I just want to finish up this. But so after they present the roles and you accept the roles, this is them knocking at the door, right? So they knocked at the door, they presented you with this narrative. Just to go back to the house analogy, this is someone essentially coming to your door and saying, hey, checked out your house. I think it's freaking great, but I noticed some like really concerning things about your house, and you probably need help with that, don't you? And I could help you. I'm a handyman, I'm whatever the fuck, I'm retired, ex-military, something that could help you improve the security of your home, whatever. You need a man living here to keep you safe. I saw you live by yourself, whatever it is. Let me into your house. because I could help you improve the safety of your house and all of these flaws that I saw in your house. And I am flawless. I am a fixer. Let me help fix your home. Your amazing, special, beautiful, and yet broken home. And we let them into the house. So now they're in the house, right? This person that we don't know at all is now in our home. And that's where they essentially begin rearranging the furniture, to continue with the house analogy. What you can really take away from this, and what I take away from this, is that the most important thing you can learn is to not blindly accept people's roles that they offer you as strangers, to just stop doing that. If you just stop doing that, and when people tell you, oh, this is who I am, instead of going, oh, they said that's who they are, that must be who they are, not like freaking out and calling them a liar, but just slowly in your own mind going, I wonder if that's true. You know what I mean? And then again, continuing to enjoy them as a person, practicing boundaries like we talked in the friendship video, practicing the boundaries, and you can put up these fences because you're going slow. Learning how to assess people's indicators and tells, their behavioral tells, is really important. Learning how to know your own behavioral tells, just knowing in general how to read people, how to pay attention to people. You know, I went to a safety class for women, and the female police officer that was teaching it, she said that she literally taught her kids as children. Like, she would play games with them where when they were out and about, she'd be like, what was the license plate number of that car that just drove past us or was in front of us? And she would give them candy or change or money or whatever as a reward for paying attention to their surroundings. If they were in a restaurant, she would be like, where are the exits in this building? You know what I mean? Like, what color shirt was that man wearing who was next to us? We do not practice these skills. That is a very important life skill to have, the awareness of what's going on around you. The same is true for our interactions with people, just being aware of, these are the things I pay attention to now when I'm talking to someone who I'm interested in romantically, or even as friends sometimes, if I'm getting like weird vibes. I pay attention to if people are contradicting themselves when they're telling me stories about themselves. And once you start doing this, it also becomes second nature. So it's not like you constantly have to just be like vigilantly sitting there, hyper focusing on everything that they're saying, to keeping notes in a notepad. It sounds like all of this becomes very neurotic, but it's actually the opposite. Once you start paying attention to what's going on around you and how people are speaking to you and the contradictions that they're saying, it becomes very second nature, and you actually can continue living your life in a very peaceful way while also noticing the things that you need to notice in order to keep yourself safe. So I pay attention to how people are contradicting themselves. If someone's attempting to present a role to me when they don't even know me, I do not like that. And I notice that very quickly now. If people who don't know me say, well, you're like this, or this is you, or try to tell me how to perceive my own life story, I don't like that, especially if I'm interested in dating a person, because that's the most intimate role you can have in my life. That's the closest you can get to my heart, is to be my life partner or my husband. So I'm going to be extra freaking cautious and extra vigilant about indicators that person's giving off. And I really look for if they're trying to trauma bond too early, if they're rushing me in the process. The easiest tell to get off of people is when you hit the brakes, dude. When you hit the brakes on the relationship and say, hey, I really want to go slow. This boundary is really important to me. Just tell them some boundaries that are important to you and see if they even give a shit. See if they even try and respect that boundary. See if they even remember. If they don't even remember, are they even like paying attention to you? Do they even care? It might sometimes just show a lack of forethought because they don't care. These are all things that you can learn to spot if you learn to practice these life skills. But I just think there's an incredible amount of education, my channel included. So it's like pot calling kettle black here. But making this video and kind of mapping this stuff out made me very aware that a lot of channels, we focus on like the indicators of predators and manipulative people. but we don't always so much focus on the indicators of kind people, of good people, of healthy relationships. And I think that's really important because, you know, in AA, they say where you look is where you're headed. Like if you're driving a car on the road and you're looking over here, you're going to slowly start turning that wheel this way, even just subconsciously. So where you look is where you are actually headed. And if you hyper focus so much on like predators and narcissists and understanding predators and narcissists, and you don't actually focus on also like what is a kind, healthy person look like, then you could be a freaking, you know, PhD genius in predators, but then you might know nothing about how to actually look for and assess the other thing, which is the thing that you actually want, the thing that you're actually attempting to find in your life. And the last thing that I will say is, you know, with all of this education on the indicators of like a person who's not safe, do you actually feel like you know who you are? Do you actually feel like you know what you want? Do you actually feel like if someone presented you with a role and presented you with a perception of yourself, you would have enough knowledge of yourself to say, no, that's not true? But that's why it's so important to take the time sometimes to spend some time by yourself, not looking for a relationship, not looking for a partner, and really trying to examine how you function as a person, what is important to you, what you are looking for. Otherwise, someone's going to come along and determine that for you. It kind of kicked me in the butt. And I was like, dang, do I actually kind of look for men who just like lead me in the relationship because I'm afraid of looking inward and actually taking ownership of myself and sort of being my own captain of my own ship? And I was a little scared to do it because how do you captain a ship? If you've never done it, it feels really intimidating and it feels like a lot of work, you know? But I hope maybe this video can help you see that this is really, if you can notice this initial pattern to how people try to get you to begin this cycle, these first few steps that they take are so imperative to beginning the whole thing. And it all starts with you just saying yes to the things that they offer without knowing anything about them. You can't know someone overnight, guys. I've heard Steve Harvey say and other people say, and I've actually found this to be true, when I've gone slow with someone, it takes about 3 months to know whether you really want to date someone or not. And I would absolutely agree with that. 3 months. That's 90 days, guys. So in those 90 days, if you make a decision even within 30 days, I really feel like I don't start really getting a vibe on someone until about month 2. And by month 3, I absolutely know them better. But that first 30 days really can be like an emotional fog and like a honeymoon stage if they are presenting a mask. I would say it's after day 30 that the mask really starts to crack a little bit and you really start seeing red flags if you're looking for them. But again, you have to be intentional about trying to look for that stuff. And at first, it is exhausting. You have to be hyper vigilant. You have to keep that plumb line journal for yourself, kind of. But after you practice it enough, you don't have to keep plumb line journals as often. And you don't have to be like neurotically thinking about all this stuff, checking in with your safe people. It's like learning any other skill. It can become second nature to you. And so I hope maybe this gave you something to think about, and God bless.